I've always been more afraid of what people are capable of as opposed to what like demons or what sort of creatures are capable of. I've always found sort of like, ghost films frightening, but because I don't technically believe in ghosts myself, they don't pose the same threat as the idea of you might be sat next to someone who's a maniac.
I had a few other ideas for a Halloween review that fell through. So instead of doing what I had planned, I looked at some online lists of recent horror films to check out, narrowed it down to a few that stood out to me, and took that in conjunction with at least one curious cat I got asking about it, and ended up watching Apostle. I had a version of this video up for patrons on Halloween, but I wasn't happy with some of the script, and also realized that I was pronouncing Apostle wrong. So here it is a few days later with some edits and corrections. Apostle is set in 1905 and is about a man named Thomas Richardson, played by Dan Stevens. Richardson is sent alone to a remote island to save his kidnapped sister from the strange cult that controls it. He has to not only figure out what the cult is up to and where his sister is without being detected, but also somehow find a way back from the island for both of them if and when he saves her. At times, Apostle shifts from being a horror or even thriller film to relying more on the tropes and visual style of the action genre, then sometimes back to gore and graphic, visceral horror, then, most often, to more supernatural or folk horror. There are scenes that are unnerving and uncanny, and scenes that are violent and viscerally upsetting, and plenty of horror tropes are used or subverted, but I wouldn't call this movie scary. The horror films that usually get to me are nihilistic dread machines, and much of Apostle feels, in contrast, and in a charming and unusual way that I mean as praise, like a video game or a fun comic book, with Richardson skulking around trying to solve the mystery of Weird Cold Island. Richardson investigating the creepy island at night reminded me of the Ravenholm area of Half-Life 2, and his demeanor reminded me of quiet, desperate moments in noir films, or more recent reimaginings of noir protagonists, like Bigby in The Wolf Among Us. I saw some Silent Hill comparisons, and I don't really agree with those, apart from in some more basic, surface-level, shallow similarities, like a couple of visuals, or just the idea of a dude looking for a female relative while investigating a cult. You start the film not really knowing who Richardson is, or what he's been up to, apart from him being estranged from his father and caring very much for his sister. He looks pretty rough, possibly having been living as some sort of drifter, but quickly cleans himself up and heads out to the creepy island. Richardson's shown almost immediately to be shrewd, manipulative, and relentless. Someone whose limits are clearly far past that of a normal person's, either from him being desperate to save his sister, or from some past experience or trauma the audience isn't made aware of initially, but he's not some kind of sociopath, or genius, or Superman, either. He represents a character type that I enjoy watching a lot. Pragmatic and intelligent, but not perfect, trying to navigate something strange and confusing. And it's fun and engaging to watch a hulking fake cultist con man semi-detective with a mysterious past. Is there something wrong with him? And if so, what is it? Why did he have a falling out with his father? What problems does he have that seem to make him addicted to some kind of drug tincture that he keeps returning to? Try to blend in on Weird Cult Island. When the film started, I was thinking about how in a horror movie, you usually have some kind of group that gets pared down, whether a family or a friend group. But in this film, Richardson is alone and unaware of the traditions and rituals of the cult he's pretending to be a part of. So the audience is along with him, trying to pick up on what's going on and hoping that he doesn't get caught. The contrast between his intelligent curiosity and his intensity and the meek, devout cultist he's trying to embody is great. You keep wondering if he'll get found out and what he's capable of doing if he is. The expressions on his face, his eyes in particular, stand out. It's even called attention to in the film in a very silly and cliched way.
Your eyes. They've seen things.
But it's true. Part of it is just how Dan Stevens naturally looks, his height and facial features, and part of it is his performance. He's brilliant. This is my first time ever seeing a film that he's in, and his portrayal of Richardson is weird and unique and magnetic. He reminds me a little bit of Edgar from Men in Black, without ever descending into being cartoony or a caricature. And his performance alone adds nuance and severity to a film that might have been lacking otherwise. Richardson is warned at the beginning of the film.
These people, they're blasphemers. A cult, a disease.
And while the cultists are creepy, they're grounded with some level of humanity and variety. Some kind, or conflicted, and some less so. And the film, not just being from Richardson's point of view, fleshes it out and gives it some complexity past man versus weird cult. I'd say don't watch the trailer before seeing the movie, but do see it after, because it's a quick and slightly exaggerated highlight reel of just how well sound is used in Apostle. Both cuts in the film matched with diegetic sound hits to make them more visceral, and the times that's echoed by sound being used in the narrative in creative and interesting ways. There are some moments where the sets look a little CGI fakey or just clearly like sets, but for the most part, the island is well designed and believable.
We spent a real long time then in pre-production then with my production designer Tom Pierce, figuring out how exactly this commune would be built, how it would work, what the ecosystem was like.
Some of the film is shot pretty standard, and some of it is shot in strange, beautiful, and creative ways. The same way that sound is used creatively. If you're wondering why I haven't mentioned other films made by director Gareth Evans, such as the Raid films, or films that clearly influence this one, like the original Wicker Man, or other films that Evans lists as inspirations like Witchfinder General or The Devils. And
looking at films like, the British folk horror genre.
Right.
Was a real sort of like leaping off point then to be able to go off and create this. The thing that kind of inspired me the most with films like, and they are all about the sort of the fear of what man is capable of, things like the Witchfinder General, the Wicker Man, and Ken Russell's The Devils, which I had not seen until 2016 when we were just about to start working on this, and was a massive sort of inspiration then, because I was just blown away by that film. I had never seen it before, didn't know what to expect, and then it just came out of nowhere.
It's because I haven't seen any of them in their entirety yet, so I don't have much of a frame of reference there, though the Wicker Man connections and similarities are so clear that they're apparent to someone like me who's never even seen the movie. Apostle probably isn't life-changing. It's a mid-budget horror action film with some standard scenes and ideas, and some subversive, shocking, and creative ones. But I enjoyed it, and would definitely recommend it. Not if you're looking for devastating dread horror, but if you're looking for a movie that elevates what could have been a standard modern horror action film about a cult into something a little more engaging, a little more creative, and a little weirder. Some Netflix original films have baffled or annoyed me, but Apostle seems like an excellent choice for a mid-budget entry for their collection.
The best thing about doing this with someone like Netflix was that they came on board as such an early part in the development of the film, but fully backing the vision of what we were doing.
Right.
And so I had all of the same kind of like creative freedoms and flexibilities that I had when I did the Raid films out in Indonesia. Differences in Indonesia, me and my wife owned the company. so I had total control back then for obvious reasons. But what I wasn't expecting was that same level of creative freedom to kind of explore and try things, no matter how absurd and no matter how, possibly sort of like transgressive some of those things might have been. I was given that freedom to explore that.
It's gruesome without feeling nihilistic or exploitative, and it felt like a segment of a larger series or universe. Like there was a life and a mythos to everything on screen, which is great for, again, a weird horror action film. Apostle wasn't as fitting as I hoped for my Halloween movie. It didn't creep under my skin and live there the way The Witch or Hereditary did, but it was still a fun, engaging watch that has stuck with me. I've been wanting to do a completely spoiler-free review, especially for a brand new movie, so I haven't gone into the plot past what you find out pretty early on. I might post some other thoughts about later parts of the film in the description or comments. While some of the plot's aspects were kind of cliched, there were plenty of times where I had no idea what was going to happen next. About halfway through the movie especially, and some scenes caught me completely off guard, usually either in their brutality or their strangeness. And I'd recommend not reading up on it, or, again, not watching the trailer. I'm glad that I didn't. If you enjoyed this video, please consider donating to my Patreon or my Ko-fi, so I can keep making video essays and reviews like this one. Also, this didn't really fit in with the review, but I found a BFI article on folk horror that I thought was interesting that I'll link in the description. Thanks!